talk a bit about Donald Trump's particular claim that he could tell within 2 minutes of Putin being in the room. He can tell within 2 minutes of a negotiation how the negotiation is going to pan out. And by the way, they will have psychological advisors on either side bending the ear of both parties in order to assist with getting a better deal. We can see that in terms of who of these two characters, Trump or Putin, the person who really wants to be liked more, it's going to be Trump, quite clearly. Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Raj Persaud. I'm a consultant doctor and psychiatrist based in private practice in London in the United Kingdom. I want to talk today about the psychology behind the negotiation that is currently occurring between the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and the head of Russia, which is Mr. Putin. So I believe there's a lot that you can learn about what's going on in the psychology behind this negotiation that could assist you in your life, given basically everything is a negotiation. If you want to get more money, you have to negotiate a pay rise with your boss. If you want to buy a house or sell a house or buy a car or sell a car, there's a negotiation to be had. Basically, all of life is a negotiation. Some are trivial, some are small, some are major. Being good at negotiation goes a long way to determining one's general success in life. And perhaps as importantly, if not more importantly, is to be confident in your ability to negotiate. So I want to talk a bit about Donald Trump's particular claim, which is, as he said, just a short time ago, that he could tell within 2 minutes of Putin being in the room. He can tell within 2 minutes of a negotiation how the negotiation is going to pan out. He can see the future. Is this true? Amongst experts in negotiation and in the academic research on negotiation, and there are whole academic journals devoted to the science of the psychology behind negotiation, does the field, does the discipline, do the experts agree with this extraordinary claim of Donald Trump that you can tell within 2 minutes how a negotiation is going to pan out? Well, the short answer is no. The research and the experts don't agree with Donald Trump's extraordinary claim. However, there's two caveats to that. There are a couple of examples of where what he's saying may have some truth, and he may be saying it as well, not because it's true, but for another reason to do with the psychology of what's going on behind the scenes in a negotiation. So I'm going to comment on some of these things. However, I need to make a point first, which is that my own expertise in negotiation lies not just in the fact I do a lot of marital therapy, and to some extent a marriage is a negotiation, but I am hired in by many people in the commercial and business world, and sometimes in the diplomatic world, to provide advice during some complex, high-stakes negotiations. So I have practical day-to-day experience of exactly not a situation not that far away from the one that, to some extent, Putin and Trump are involved in at the moment. And by the way, they will have psychological advisors on either side bending the ear of both parties in order to assist with getting a better deal. That's a well-known strategy now in the world of business and commerce and diplomacy. However, the other source of my expertise comes from the fact that I have made various programs, particularly for the BBC, that have been broadcast on the subject of negotiation. And one series in particular, called The Negotiators, was one where we went around interviewing the best negotiators in the world that worked for the police when people were sent in to negotiate when a siege had occurred and hostages were taken. And armed gunmen had taken a group of people. We went to America and talked to the top FBI negotiators for this BBC series that was subsequently broadcast. And we went to other parts of the world where sieges and hostages and terrorists had taken hostages. And so I have some practical experience of talking to the very best in the world in the most high-stakes situations of all, where lots of lives are at stake, in terms of getting a handle on the cutting edge of the psychology of negotiation. So let's go back to Trump's extraordinary claim that you can tell within 2 minutes what's going to happen with a negotiation and with a deal, and the fact that the field wouldn't agree, with a couple of caveats. The first one is that you can front load a negotiation. So there's a sense in which Trump may be right if he's thinking in that way. Front loading a negotiation, for want of a better way of putting it, is where you make preconditions before people arrive in the negotiation, and those preconditions tell you a lot about how the negotiation is going to go. You can, for example, determine or say, I'm only going to negotiate if we meet in this particular place. Trump and Putin are meeting in Alaska. Whose idea was that? You can also up front say that who's going to be allowed in the negotiation, what the basic conditions are under which you will start the negotiation. And a lot can be discerned by how parties cave or are submissive or not submissive, and how desperate they are to get to the negotiating table by the preconditions you set up. So you can front load the negotiation, and if it turns out you get your way every step of the way about who's allowed in the negotiating room, where the negotiation's held, what the conditions are under which you only agree to the negotiation under these conditions, if you front load it that way, you can tell before you've arrived in the negotiation room, and if Trump is saying this, and he is right, you can tell how a negotiation is going to go by how the other side caved on your preconditions or didn't cave, as the case may be. I have to say that Donald Trump has got Putin in the room without securing any quid pro quo, which he could have done. He could have said, we're only going to meet on the condition there's a temporary ceasefire. He could have got something from Putin because Putin's getting something from being in the room with the world's most powerful man. Yet Trump didn't do that. And so something is revealed about Trump's negotiating styles. Some people would say, at the risk of criticizing him, a lack of subtlety. He tends to gallop to the end goal, the end prize, without seeing there's steps along the way where you secure small victories, and these small victories eventually produce a big victory. I have to say, one doesn't want to diagnose public figures one hasn't directly met. Though, by the way, we are broadcasting a series attached to this channel where it looks like Donald Trump has met a psychiatrist, in this case me, and you'll be seeing some clips on that later on. But a narcissist, I'm not saying he's a narcissist, but a narcissist wants the big win, and therefore hasn't got the time and hasn't got the patience for all these small victories that are necessary often in a negotiation. So there's a real sense in which does Trump's personality really suit some of these subtle and sophisticated negotiations that have to occur if you're the US president. His personality suits how to get elected, but does it suit the actual job itself in terms of the subtlety of negotiation? So there's another sense in which Trump may be right, though very few people would agree that the 2-minute thing he's talked about is real in negotiation, that you can tell within 2 minutes how a negotiation is going to pan out. But the other sense in which he could be right is some famous research that's shown that if you ban people who arrive for a mediation or a negotiation from actually discussing the negotiation for a short while, let's say 10 minutes or half an hour, and you for various reasons, you engineer the situation, the negotiation doesn't formally begin, but people are in a room together, small talk will occur. Right? So if you engineer it, you can do it manipulatively by saying we're going to meet at this time and the negotiation will begin half an hour later. What are these two people going to do when they stare at each other in the room having a coffee? But small talk will happen. And when small talk occurs, people start to bond emotionally. They see each other as human beings rather than as pawns in a game which has to be won. And in that bonding and that emotional connection that begins, if you make people do small talk before the negotiation formally begins, there's a lot of research evidence the negotiation tends to be more successful. In other words, it tends to be the case that people reach an agreement. However, that doesn't mean that one side wins over the other. It just is that there's an outcome whereby the mediation is successfully accomplished. So there is a sense in which Trump could be hinting at that. He could be saying, when we do a little small talk together at the beginning, and I get to know Vladimir, then that will tell me how it's going to go. So he could mean that. Of course, he could mean none of these things, and Trump could just be a very skilled negotiator, a kind of horse whisperer of negotiation. So he has an advantage at some level, you could say, at the practical business cutting edge, compared to all these academics who, when they publish their studies, say we don't agree with what Donald Trump is suggesting. However, having said that, one thing he's doing, which is certainly not in the rule book of negotiation, is revealing his hand. He's revealing his cards. He does have a tendency to do that. Donald Trump has a personality where he's always on social media or doing press conferences. And generally speaking, one of the rules of negotiation is keep your cards close to your chest so you don't reveal your cards, so you don't allow the other party to plan ahead over the negotiation. And Donald Trump seems to be very bad at that. However, maybe it's a double bluff, this whole 2-minute thing. Maybe in saying to Vladimir Putin via social media or the news and press conferences that the first 2 minutes are important, he is getting Mr. Putin to try to be nice in the first 2 minutes, and therefore, in a way, he's manipulated Putin by declaring this statement, because Putin will try to be nice for the first 2 minutes. He's not going to be foolishly ignoring this statement, and maybe that is one way by which Trump will secure a better outcome, because he and Putin will bond, and he believes that in some sense he's going to be better at the bonding and the outcome of that than Putin. There is, again, I'm afraid to say, some evidence that Trump is going to be the loser on that front, because when people are bonding, the outcome is determined in a tough negotiation that then follows as to who's the person that doesn't care about being liked. The whole small talk theory or strategy is that we now like and bond with each other. We care about being liked. We don't annoy the other person, so we'll be nicer in the negotiation if there's this period of time where you don't start negotiating but kind of get to know each other and get to bond. We can see that in terms of who of these two characters, Trump or Putin, the person who really wants to be liked more, it's going to be Trump, quite clearly. Putin's a dictator. He quite clearly, quite frankly, doesn't give a damn quite a lot about whether he's liked or not, quite clearly. Whereas it seems as though Trump is much more sensitive about that. And therefore, that is another ominous sign in terms of the outcome of this negotiation. So the final point I want to make about the 2-minute thing that he's talked about is that there's a sense in which, frankly speaking, Trump is trying to show off. He's like this master negotiator. He can tell within 2 minutes what's going to happen in the future, which is an extraordinary claim, and it's got everyone sitting around scratching their heads going, wow, the guy's some kind of genius. This tendency to show off or to need to show off, this display of your psychological and emotional cards is not a good strategy in negotiation, because the other side have learnt that the President of the United States is vulnerable to flattery. And if they can work out a deal that makes Trump look good but gives Putin what he wants, then we're all in trouble, frankly. I've talked a little bit about the psychology of negotiation. I hope you've taken away some pointers that may help you when you think about your negotiation. But the final point I want to leave you with is the power of silence. When I'm doing these tough negotiations where I'm hired by companies and corporations and a multi-billion-pound deal on the table, I've noticed that one of the bits of advice I have to give the most of is be quiet. You've put out your offer, now go quiet. Don't constantly try to engage with the other party. There's a power to silence. It's one of the most powerful negotiating ploys of all. Going quiet, being silent. And I just worry that Trump is just completely, almost pathologically incapable of going silent. So one of the key tools of negotiation is lost to the Western world. Thank you very much.